All right, so just one more friendly reminder. I believe my video is pinned, but if you don't want your face to appear in the recording, feel free to turn your camera off for your privacy. That's totally fine. Um, so I know all of you at this point, but for anybody who might catch the recording later, my name is Courtney. I'm the director of our Tapestries memory support community here at United Methodist Communities of Pittman. I am a social worker by background with a lot of experience in senior care, brain injury, mental health, all the good juicy brain stuff. So that's me. So tonight we're doing something a little bit different than what we normally do. This November is National Alzheimer's Awareness Month. So kind of in the spirit of that, and also based on some of the feedback I had gotten from you in the past, tonight we're going to talk about, like, how do you know the difference between what's normal forgetfulness that still means you've got a good healthy brain, and where's the point where you should be concerned that your forgetfulness might be something more and get some more help. I know in my own family, so dementia runs in my family, and so I know from speaking with a lot of you that there are also these concerns, like, my loved one is going through this. How will I know if it's happening to me, when it's happening to me? How will I get help? Those sorts of things. So hopefully tonight I'll answer some of those questions for you. So we'll start with a little bit of just general brain development, very like light, easy stuff. And then we'll kind of go through from there where, you know, what's normal, what you should be concerned about, and what you should do about it. Okay. I will not mute anybody so that you can feel free to jump in at any point if you have questions or comments or need more information. So just if you've got noise going on in the background, please just be mindful of it and mute yourself if you can. All right. So on that note, so this is just like I said, a really quick, light and easy kind of feel for how the brain works and how it develops. So you'll see we've got this colorful image of the brain. It tells you kind of vaguely what each part is responsible for. It's simplified. Our brain does, all the parts of our brain have a hand in almost everything we do, but different regions of the brain do kind of feature primarily in certain brain functions. And that's why if you've had multiple family members with dementia, you may notice that they've had wildly different symptoms based on which parts of their brain are affected. So the brain goes through normal cycles of growth and pruning. So I think growth is pretty self-explanatory. Most of our brain growth happens before we're even born, while we're in utero. And so our brain is pretty much fully formed, but not necessarily fully developed when we're children. And then as we grow, it'll start to do pruning, which is a little less intuitive. So pruning, just like you would prune a rose bush or any flowers in your home to take off old buds, dead leaves, things like that, the brain kind of does the same thing. So usually around the age of 8 months old, and again around 24 months old, our brain goes through and cleans house. It says these synapses are unnecessary. This is too much. We don't use this. We can make this more efficient, and it cuts all the dead weight. So it's kind of scary to think that we're already losing brain tissue that young. But it's really to help our brains operate more efficiently and make our thinking processes go faster and our automatic processes go faster. So that's actually a totally normal process, but it really only happens those 2 times when we're very young. From there, it just is what it is. And so it continues to develop until we reach around age 25. So if you've had interactions with 20-somethings and thought they still seem like children, it's because they are developmentally. So the brain is fully mature around age 25, and that's when we do our best work in terms of risk assessment, problem solving, things like that, which are the last areas of the brain to develop. And then we get to enjoy that good, juicy, fully developed, wonderful brain for about 10 years before it starts to fall apart. which is kind of sad. We only get it like good for 10 years. But so normal cognitive decline begins around 35. So sadly, I'm already past my prime. So normal cognitive decline starts around age 35, but this is, again, completely normal, totally healthy. This is your occasional absent-mindedness, a lot going on, things kind of get misplaced, or, if I don't write it down, it'll be out the window, that sort of thing. Early signs of dementia can start as soon as 50. More often, we don't notice those symptoms until much later. There are certainly times where we might notice it sooner. For example, people with Down syndrome typically tend to develop dementia in their 30s and 40s, just part of the genetic differences that contribute to Down syndrome, for whatever reason, also make them more prone to dementia and early onset dementia. So there are absolutely exceptions to this rule. But for the most part, around age 50 is when you would start to see very early signs, and you can see them much later. Any questions about just the general brain health? Okay. All right. So, like I said, 35, we start to notice some changes. And so that's normal cognitive decline, and it can continue throughout the rest of our lives and be totally normal and healthy. And so what that looks like is once in a while making a bad decision. It happens. Every now and then missing a monthly payment, forgetting to pay a bill. Even the best of us do it sometimes. Forgetting what day of the week it is and remembering it later, especially if it's been a holiday week, especially if you've had vacation time recently, especially if you've retired. What day of the week it is almost like a non-factor for you anymore. So it's totally normal to forget what day of the week it is. And usually later you'll be like, oh yeah, it's Tuesday. Sometimes losing the word you want to use. So that sensation of like, it's on the tip of my tongue. I know what I mean. It just won't come. Occasionally losing things. So like, that all sounds, if you think about it, that all sounds like normal stuff. We've probably been doing it all our lives for years, every now and then. And then those normal things are also impacted by other stressors in our lives. So if we're in pain, say you've got a migraine and you feel like your brain is all over the place, or like it's nowhere, it's just shut off and you can't find it for the life of you, that's a real thing. That pain does impact your cognitive functioning. If you're sick, if you're anxious, if you're overwhelmed, if you're depressed, all of those things can worsen those normal everyday forgetfulness things. Even something as simple as being dehydrated. It's kind of a strange thing to think about, but our bodies are roughly 70% water. And like if you're dehydrated, you're literally less of yourself because of that. And so all of our organs, including our brain, function a little less well when they don't have the resources they need, including that water. So all of those things can make that normal forgetfulness worse. Mm-hmm. So what we want to do to help support ourselves with normal cognitive decline is make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. We want to make sure we're drinking enough water, we're eating well, we're going to the doctor when we're sick. If you're feeling depressed, anxious, overwhelmed, those sorts of things, maybe seeking either counseling or medication or both to help manage it. And typically you'll see, as you take care of yourself in those ways, that memory function improves. We can also introduce healthy memory and routine supporting habits, and that's something that we're going to talk about at the end. So we're going to talk about all the new healthy things that we can do to help make our memories a little better and keep ourselves going for a little longer. So questions about this? All right. Anybody experience this on a routine basis? Okay, lots of nodding, lots of hands raised. Good. It's good to know I'm not the only one. I always think I'm in the right place because I struggle just as much as my residents do sometimes. All right. So then the next stage is mild cognitive impairment. And this is not dementia, but it is also not normal. It's kind of a middle ground. And so one of the things that I want to stress for this is that mild cognitive impairment can lead to dementia. It could be an early sign, but it is not necessarily a guarantee. There are a great many people, the majority of people with mild cognitive impairment do not go on to develop dementia. So even if you have these struggles, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're headed down this road. But so this is a little more severe. Some of those same symptoms that we already talked about, but more severe. Losing things often, several times a week, that sort of thing. If you constantly cannot find your keys, every single time you go to look for them, you're like, they're gone, that sort of thing. Forgetting important events, occasions, appointments, things like that. If you are routinely missing doctor's appointments that you just completely forgot existed, maybe you used to be good at remembering all of your loved ones' birthdays, and now, you find yourself making those "I'm so sorry, happy belated" kind of calls a lot. Having a lot of trouble coming up with words, more so than other people your age. So if you're spending time with friends and conversation seems to be flowing, and then it gets to you and there's a lot of stuttering, you feel really stuck, that might be a sign that you're struggling more than normal. And so one of the big things, and this is a major difference between mild cognitive impairment and dementia, is that you're still generally able to care for yourself. So you can still get through your day-to-day routine. You just might need some extra supports or some extra changes in your habits to help make your life easier. And things like that is like simple stuff. And again, we'll talk about this in more detail at the end, but it's simple stuff, making lists, using a date book, keeping things in a consistent place, stuff like that, to help support the struggles that you may or may not have with mild cognitive impairment. But you're still able to live your life, and often still able to do it completely independently, maybe with just a little more difficulty than a person without those challenges would have. So if you find yourself in this category where it's happening more and more often, you would definitely want to talk with your doctor about those concerns and schedule at least annual and maybe even semi-annual checkups with your primary care doctor, and where they can do routine memory testing. And really your goal at that point, it's going to be likely the same assessment every single time. So you're going to find a place to write down your score where it's safe and where you know where it is. And every time you meet with that doctor, you're going to compare the score to the previous score so that you can see kind of how it's doing. And hopefully it's staying the same, but if you notice it having significant changes, then we're going to escalate to a different level. Okay. Questions about any of this? No? Okay. So then dementia, and a lot of you, because we do have loved ones with this, a lot of this is going to sound familiar from your experiences with your loved ones. The really big challenge for dementia symptoms is that often when they start, we don't necessarily have the insight to see them anymore. And so a major part of recognizing that these things are happening is being communicative with our loved ones, our friends around us that we see regularly, so that they can help us kind of assess ourselves for these things too. But asking the same questions repeatedly. So this is something I know we all experience with our loved ones, but if you find yourself asking the same questions several times in the course of one conversation, that could be concerning. That's often an early sign. Getting lost in familiar places. Maybe you've been using the same grocery store and the same post office for 20 years, as long as you've lived in your home. And if you suddenly can't find your way there, or you suddenly can't remember which aisle the thing you're looking for is in, that could be a sign that something is changing. Having trouble with complex tasks. So anything complex it just means that it's a lot of steps. So things like following recipes, navigating to new places. So say you've got a new doctor, or you're going to meet a friend at a restaurant you've never tried before, getting to those new places might be really challenging. Financial information, managing bills, things like that is often one of the first areas people with dementia notice that they're struggling. Confusion about time, people, and places. So, excuse me. Doing too much talking today. So confusion about time, people, and places. Maybe it's one of those like, I know you, but I don't know why. You know, or like, this place looks so familiar. Have I been here before? I'm not, like that sort of thing. Those might be things that you want to look into. Not taking care of yourself. I know from conversations with a handful of you that this is often the first thing that helped you notice that there was something going on with your own loved ones. Not eating well, not showering the way that they once did, not taking as good a care of their clothes, things like that. Excuse me. So that's often a big one. And this is partly because we don't remember that we haven't done it. It's partly because it just slips our mind, or because it just doesn't seem as important and it kind of gets pushed by the wayside. And before you know it, maybe you were like, oh, I'll shower tomorrow. Every other day is not that bad. And before you know it, a week's gone by and you're a little ripe. So, so that's a big one. Frequent poor judgment and bad decisions. So this isn't the occasional slip up. This isn't like, ooh, I shouldn't have said that, in a heated situation. This is, I am routinely putting my foot in my mouth. This is, I am routinely making mistakes that I am then dealing with the consequences of. It's happening frequently, at least a few times a month, often, a few times a week. Difficulty carrying on a conversation. And this is part of that, like losing your words thing. It might be hard to remember what you wanted to say. It might be hard to remember what the person across from you was talking about to know how to respond. And so that makes it very challenging to have a conversation. Often, if you're a very social person, often what you'll end up doing, and what we see a lot, is that you become less social, because it's very hard to have those conversations that you once found so rewarding. And so we take ourselves out of that situation to spare us the discomfort of thinking about what's changed, or of having other people notice. So if you notice that you're like withdrawing from social situations that you used to look forward to, that could be a sign that you need to pay a little more attention. Like, why am I pulling away? Am I pulling away because it's harder than it used to be? And now, like, I don't know what to do about it. So just something to kind of think about if you notice that you're like canceling plans a lot, backing out at the last minute, that sort of thing. And misplacing things often and being unable to find them. So this is that, like, so I know I'm famous for, oh, I'm going to put this in a safe place. And then the place is so safe that even I don't remember it. And so I hear that the magic spell to fix that is to go and buy a thing to replace it. You put it in a safe place, you can't find it anymore, you replace it, and suddenly you have two. I don't know why it works that way. But if you find that happening to yourself often, that you've put something in a safe place and you can't remember what that safe place is, that's definitely an area for concern. And so if you find yourself at this point, yes, those annual assessments with your primary care are a great place to start, but you may also want to talk with your primary care doctor about referral to a neurologist for a full assessment. So they will do a ton more. It'll be more than the maybe 10, 15 questions that your primary care will ask. It'll touch on more areas. There will probably also be some functional assessments where they have you do a skill, whether it's sorting something or like a timed, like how quickly can you do this, that sort of thing. And often in combination with some brain imaging and things like that. So they'll do a full assessment. even if you go to that neurology appointment and they say, nope, everything looks good, if you're noticing these symptoms, stay on top of it. Do it routinely. The earlier you find out, the better off you're going to be. And then you can talk with your doctor about medication options and clinical trials. So I know some of us have loved ones that are on dementia and Alzheimer's medications. Some of us have chosen to forego them. There's no right or wrong answer. So they, typically speaking, most of the medications that are approved on the market now do help mask the symptoms, but they don't slow the decline. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You can take those pills and it seems like they're helping, but it's not going to slow the progression of the disease, unfortunately. It's going to make you able to function better for longer, but that timeline is still that timeline, unfortunately. And I don't think they're necessarily clear about that when doctors explain to you how those medications work. So, but yeah, there are certainly medications. If you do find yourself having these struggles, there are certainly medications you can use to buy yourself more time while you get your things in order. Questions about any of this? No? Okay. So then what do we do? Right? Because ultimately our goal is, hopefully not to have these struggles. We've watched our loved ones go through them. We don't want to have those struggles. And often we don't want to put those struggles on our loved ones as well, because we know firsthand how hard it is. We don't want to put our loved ones through that. So things we can do to support a healthy memory now. Follow a daily routine. It sounds really simple and straightforward, but it is more helpful than almost anything else. We need structure. So even on weekends, get up close to the same time you would during the week. Do relatively the same activities. So, if you've retired, your day probably has a lot less structure than it once did. That doesn't mean you want to sit around like a bump on a log all day. You still want to have activities to keep you moving, to keep your brain engaged, to keep a schedule so that your body and your mind are both on the same page of like, I need to keep going. That's going to help you function better for longer. Make plans, use to-do lists, use calendars, use notes. Okay, you will never without a to-do list by my side. I have probably 3 on my desk right now. So I have my monthly calendar with the big stuff, like that I need to know days in advance. I have my, these are the tasks I need to accomplish in the next few days list. And then I have my, oh my gosh, this has to happen today list. Whatever system works for you is fine. But absolutely use those tools. I know I'm like a sieve. If I don't write it down or do it immediately upon thinking of it, it is gone. And if I remember it, I'll remember it at the worst possible time, like while I'm driving and can't handle it, or when I'm laying down to go to bed at night and don't want to, that sort of thing. So by all means, carry a little notepad with you so that when that thought pops up, do that. If you can't carry a little notepad with you, one of my favorite tricks is that I will send myself a text message for later. So we pretty much all have cell phones attached to us all the time now. So go ahead and text yourself. And if you've got most Android phones, and I think some iPhones, you can schedule text messages for later times. So if I need to remember this when I get home tonight, schedule a text message to come to you at 6 o'clock, so you have a nice little reminder. If you have like Google Home devices or the Amazon Echo Alexa thing, and those are great, you can set reminders on those, whatever system works for you, but absolutely use those to your advantage. Put frequently lost items in the same place every day. So your keys, your wallet, your shoes, your phone, the little stuff that we tend to come home and just kind of shed. And, maybe one day you shed it right by the kitchen door as you come in, and the next day you leave it on the dining table, and then one day you kick off your shoes on the couch, and the next morning you're like, I have no idea where anything is. Make a space. Okay. Make, key hooks or a little bowl by your door for those things that you're using all the time. If you're one of those fortunate people that has a mud room where you can like take your shoes off and your purse off and make sure it's always there, that sort of thing. But make sure you are putting things in the same space every time you take them off, every time you sit them down. That way you'll know where to find it. And that's just, for those of us that have children, that's like the hardest lesson to learn, but it's the thing you most want your children to learn. I know for me and my daughter, she can never find it when it's in the right place because that's never where she put it. So, but if we as adults who know better build that habit, it stays habit even as our memory progresses. So even if we do have those struggles, if we know to always look for something in the same place, we're automatically going to go there. And if we build enough of a habit, it'll always be there when we need it. So it cuts down on that frustration of losing those things. Stay involved in activities that support both the body and the mind. So I know exercise is hard. I know it's nobody's favorite thing. And I know that as busy adults, especially caretaking your parents and your children, you're in that super awesome like sandwich generation where you've got to take care of both the older and the younger, and it's really challenging. It can be hard to find time to do this. Exercise is so important for your brain health. I think we often think about exercise as a way to keep fit or a way to keep slim. Realistically, you're never going to do enough exercise to undo what you eat. If you've ever looked at how far you have to run to burn off a Snickers bar, it's like the most depressing thing you will ever see. Okay. So don't get me wrong, it helps, but it's not making a dent. If you were going to exercise enough to balance what you eat, you would be exercising like 22 hours a day, which is my personal definition of hell. So, exercise does far more for our brain health, far more. That increased circulation, that increased oxygen flow, that purging of toxins through sweat, all of that is really good for our brain. It's good for our mental health, our emotional stability, but also just for our general brain health. So by all means, make time, find an exercise you love, even if it's not like a traditional one. Like if you can't stand push-ups and sit-ups, but you like to dance, make a point of going dancing. Get your girlfriends together, get your husband to go out with you or whatever, go dancing, take a walk, go to the beach and walk the boardwalk, especially like it's a little chilly this time of year, but it's so serene and so quiet. Whatever you need to do to make an exercise routine that you love, support your brain through that. It's a really great tool. And also things that support our mind. We never want to stop learning. So if you're the kind of person who likes crossword puzzles and word finds and Sudoku puzzles, great. If you're the kind of person who plays games on your phone, cool, that does it too. If you like to read, if you like to bake, though, cooking, following recipes, all of that is a brain workout. Do not give those things up. If anything, take opportunities to do those things more. They're going to they yield really great returns beyond the pleasure of actually doing the thing. Get enough sleep. Simultaneously, the easiest and the hardest suggestion. Yeah, it's really that simple. Get enough sleep. It has just a truly crazy impact on our cognition. If you've ever had a sleepless night and had to work the next day, you know how much foggier you feel. Now, I know realistically, most of us as working adults, we're probably getting maybe 5 or 6 hours a night if we're lucky. It's not enough. And eventually it catches up with you. And so if you feel like you're in a fog, if you feel like you're constantly overwhelmed, this is a great place to start. Find a way to make more sleep. It's one of the best things we can do. So exercise and eat well. So we talked about the exercise a bit already. Lots of vegetables. As of right now, all the research suggests that the best things that we can do for brain health and prevention of Alzheimer's is eat well, is exercise. It's the first thing your doctors are going to tell you to do. We don't know why it works, but we know that it does. It's your best course of action if you want to prevent it for yourself, is making sure you're eating really well, you're taking really good care of yourself, and you're getting enough exercise. Manage your blood pressure and cholesterol. So I think many of us have probably heard about the plaques in the brain that are often considered part of dementia and Alzheimer's. Realistically, we don't necessarily know that those are what cause it. We know that they're present for people with dementia and Alzheimer's, but we don't necessarily do a lot of research to see how present those things are for people without dementia and Alzheimer's. So it may just be that plaque is part of the brain development, and we just haven't looked at healthy brains to know the difference. But we do know that high blood pressure and high cholesterol worsens those things. So we want to manage that, keep our stress levels down, manage those so that we can have a healthier brain. Reduce alcohol use, drug and alcohol use, we want to keep it to a minimum. I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe the current guidelines are like 3 drinks a week for women and 4 a week for men maximum. It might be less than that now. But more than that, whether you're the occasional drinker, but you drink a lot when you drink, if you're the occasional partier, power to you, but you might want to tone it down. If you're the person who casually has a glass of wine or so with dinner, you might just want to do it like every other day instead of every day, that sort of thing, just to help reduce that intake and help protect your brain. Spend time with friends and family. This is important for so many reasons. It's important so that you have that stimulation, that camaraderie, those connections, which are great for preserving brain integrity, but also so that you're spending time with the people that know you best, so that if things start to change, you have other eyes to help you catch it so that you can get help sooner. So that's one of those that helps on 2 different ends. It helps keep our brains more active, it helps keep us more engaged, but it also helps us catch it faster if we are struggling. Learn something new. Take up a new skill. Especially for those of us as we near retirement age, you got to do something with all that time you used to spend at work. Maybe you always wanted to learn how to knit or crochet, take that up. Maybe you always wanted to paint, but you couldn't draw a stick figure if your life depends on it. Doesn't matter, do it anyway. The great thing about learning a new skill is you don't have to be good at it to benefit from it. So if you've always had something you wanted to try, or even maybe you have a friend or a family member who's trying something new and it's something you never thought of, but you've got the time, go ahead and join them. There's no harm in trying something new. There's a world of benefit in learning something new. One of the most sad things about dementia for me is that we lose the ability to learn. We lose the ability to retain new information and to apply it to new situations. And I'm an avid learner. My parents always joked that if college was free, I would never stop being a student. And they're probably right. So I think that there's value in that. And the research shows that there's value in continuing to learn and being a lifelong learner. And one of the downfalls of dementia is that we lose the ability to learn. So if we can challenge ourselves to keep learning new information, we can help hold that at bay. Volunteering is a great way to do that. So this checks a lot of these boxes. It gives us a daily routine. It gives us socialization. It helps us feel productive. Often it's doing something outside of our comfort zone. So it's helping us learn new things, meet new people, all things that support brain health. And often it just gives us a sense of fulfillment too, to know that we're doing good for other people. And so as I mentioned early on, anxiety, depression, negative feelings can have a really bad impact on our memory and our cognition. Those positive feelings have a really great impact on our cognition, on our memory. So if we can do things that make us feel good, if we can do good for the community, for those around us, it can be very helpful. And then this last one, this is more of a what not to do, but just be wary of supplements, brain games, miracle cures, all those things. So I know I get ads all the time, and so I'm guessing that you do too, that'll say like, what's your brain age? Play this word game to find out, you know, or doctors recommend Candy Crush 3 hours a day for whatever. No, they don't. They don't, I promise. If you enjoy those games and those games keep your mind active, by all means play them, but don't expect them to cure you. Don't expect them to fix things. Don't expect them to build brain connections where they're not. Generally speaking, they do preserve the parts of the brain that we're using. They do give our brain a workout, which is great, but they don't. There's no research to suggest that we can apply that to other skills. So if you're great at a word game on your phone, it doesn't mean you're going to be great at words in a conversation with your friends. We don't take that skill and travel with it to other areas of our lives. So basically the short version is, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So are there supplements that are good for brain health? Yes, absolutely. Are there supplements that are proven to reverse or prevent dementia? No, there just aren't. And sadly, the reality is that we are so desperate for a cure for dementia, that we want one so badly that we often fall victim to that, that marketing that makes us believe that something's going to change it. And so one of the things that I wanted to mention is there's a new medication that's currently under review by the FDA, and it's in an expedited review process for dementia. And it looks like they're going to get approval, and the research doesn't back it. And so it's one of those things. So when I mentioned earlier, the medications can help mask the symptoms so that you can be functional for a longer time. This is a very simplified description of how they do that, but they kind of give the brain a little extra juice. So it's almost like hooking a battery up to your brain and giving it a little extra power. So it takes more energy for us to do those tasks. It gives us the more energy we need to do them, but at a cost, because all that extra energy we're putting into the brain needs to go out somewhere. And so often we see that it comes with increased anxiety. We see that it comes with restlessness and fidgeting and things like that, that may or may not be worth the benefits. It's truly a person by person basis. But there is a new medication, again, that is in review processes, and it's got a truly terrible medication name, aducanumab. So one of those. I know I've got at least one nurse in the audience, so you can decipher that medical lingo. But the way that it works is by reducing amyloid deposits in the brain, and amyloid deposits, like those plaques, are one of the things that we know is associated with dementia. But all of our research suggests that reducing those in a brain for a person with dementia does not reverse the symptoms, does not stop the progress, does not change where the person is. And yet that's the way that it's being marketed to the FDA right now. And so it's reasonable to expect that if it gets that approval, that's the way that it'll be marketed to us as, consumers of it. And so this is just, this is my soapbox to tell you that if you see those things, take them with a grain of salt, do your research, be smart about it, absolutely do what you need to do to take care of yourself, but do it with a healthy dose of skepticism to make sure you're not being taken advantage of. Because the medications that we currently have, there is research to back that they help. They don't slow the progression, but they do help with the symptoms. This medication doesn't have any of that support, and yet they're marketing it as though it's some kind of a miracle drug. And so I just worry for the families that are going to latch onto that as like a beacon of hope, and and very likely be let down. So just, be mindful when you hear those things that promise great results, that they may not be able to deliver on what they do. Unfortunately, we don't have any cures as of right now. Questions on that? No? Okay. All right. And then, so bonus steps. So these are, the things that we've already talked about are good things that every person can and should do to make their lives easier as they, as they progress in age, and that can help support us if we're struggling with some memory issues. Bonus steps, this is if you truly feel like this is coming for me. I know, as I said, it runs in my family, both sides. I have been confident that I'm going to end up with dementia someday since I was about 15 years old. I don't know that that's true, but I'm preparing as though that's true, because I want to spare my family the troubles that I've had. So take this, with a grain of salt, but this is extra. Talk to your loved ones about your concerns. As I mentioned, often when the symptoms set in, the insight isn't there. We don't see ourselves as clearly as we once did at that point. And so if we're counting on ourselves to notice when we're struggling, we may be setting ourselves up for failure. So it might be an uncomfortable conversation to have with your brothers and sisters, with your children, with any significant friends or close family that you want involved in your life as you age. They're probably not going to want to hear it necessarily. I know that I didn't want to hear it when my grandparents tried to have those talks with me when I was younger. But realistically, one of the best things we can do is bring that team in and let them know, I'm worried and I want you to pay attention. And I want you to hold me accountable. If you see that I'm having struggles, whatever you have to do to get me to a doctor, you have my blessing, that sort of thing. Let them know that that's what's important to you now, because your values as you age and change may be different. But if this is something that you worry about, the more people that know and the more people that can support you through that process, the better off everyone involved will be. Start documenting your life, your routines, and your preferences. So for those of you that have had loved ones that live in Tapestries, you know that we gave you that really awesome packet with like 8,000 questions in it about what life looked like at every stage. Realistically, I mean, some of you did a phenomenal job on those things. Like there's writing in the margins, there's pages attached, like there's a lot of information in there, but you don't know every detail of your parents' life the way that they once did. And the same is true of you. Your children, your loved ones, your families will not know every detail of your life the way that you do. So ideally, start recording that stuff. This is what my life was like when I was a kid. This is what was important to me. This is who was important to me. This is what I liked to do, what I didn't like. Teenage years, same thing. Adult years, same thing. Current life. And then set reminders for yourself. Again, whether that's those, text messages we schedule, whether those are, Alexa or Google Home reminders, whether those are notes we put on our calendar, every couple of months. Check in and see if those routines have changed, and just note any changes and let your family know where to find that. And that way, as you go through your life, you're updating it so that there is always an accurate record of your life from your perspective. I cannot tell you how immensely helpful those documents are for us in caring for your loved ones. it's crazy the difference that it makes when we can look at that and go, oh my gosh, that's why they're upset. We did a thing that we should have known better, or when we can go and say, oh, this is something that always works to cheer them up, all of that stuff. I know. So we used to have a gentleman here that every day at 5 p.m. he would start wringing his hands, and he would wring them so vigorously that he was tearing skin off, and his hands were just torn to pieces because of that. And when we looked into his history, we discovered that he had been a mechanic his entire life, and 5 o'clock was when he got done work, and his first task when he got done work was washing all of the grease and grime off his hands. And so he hadn't been a mechanic for 20 years at that point, but his mind was so fixed on that routine that every day at 5 o'clock, that's what he was doing. And without the soap and water to kind of grease the gears there, he was tearing the skin off his hands. And so once we noticed that and could help him wash his hands appropriately, give him the soap and water, give him lotion to help tend to his skin, like, it's a silly thing, but it makes a world of difference. And you never know which details about your life are going to be those details that make that difference until you're there. And if you do end up with dementia or Alzheimer's, at that point, it may or may not be too late for you to communicate that that's what's going on. So please start documenting your life, start documenting your routines. There is nothing too big or small to include in that to help make your life better and to help make your family and your caretakers' lives easier should the worst happen. Organize important documentation and financial information in a safe space, and make sure that people you trust know where that safe space is. Okay. I cannot stress this enough. So, like I said, finances are often one of the first major problems for people with dementia because they require a lot of concentration. They require a lot of focus and memory and attention to detail that a brain with dementia just can't do. And so at the point that we need help with our finances, we may or may not be able to convey that information to our loved ones. So you should have a space where you're documenting account numbers and passwords and balances and routine bills that need to be paid. Any documents, like important documents, will, power of attorney, that sort of thing, that your family should know where to find. Make sure that's all in one place. Make sure it's a safe place, because you definitely don't want something with that much important information getting in the wrong hands. But do communicate with somebody that you trust about where it is and how they can access it if the time comes. Because you won't be able, if you need it, you won't be able to organize it later. So do that proactively. Begin speaking with your loved ones about your preferences for care in your golden years. And again, I mentioned this, be prepared for discomfort and avoidance. Okay. So like I said, I know when my grandparents started, probably when I was like 15, 16 years old, my grandparents, every time I went to visit, would put a pack of Post-it notes in my hand and be like, stick one of these to everything you want when we die. Okay, so I see some of you making faces. You've clearly had this experience. And I was like, nope, not gonna do that. That's creepy and morbid, and I don't want to think about you dying. Not doing it. In hindsight, it gave my grandparents a lot of peace of mind to know that the things that were sentimental to me were going to be mine when they passed. They did eventually wear me down in my late 20s. It took them a good 15 years almost. But it is an uncomfortable conversation. Your loved ones are not going to want to think about what could happen. They're not going to want to think about problems that may or may not ever come to pass. But they have to do it now. There is no such thing as too soon. There is such a thing as too late. That's the simplest way that I can explain it. You know, you can never have that conversation too early, but there will be a time where you're not able to have that conversation at all if you develop dementia. And so the sooner you can have that conversation with your loved ones and really convey to them how important it is to you that they participate in it, the sooner you do that, the better off you're going to be. And talk to them about what you want. So you're all fortunately in a place where you know what a care community looks like now. And you know what care you could and could not comfortably provide at home and what care you need other people to do. And some of you have had experience with hospitals and rehabs and other levels of care where you've seen a wide array. You know what you do and don't want for yourself. Okay. I know when I walked into my great grandmother's nursing home that I was like, ugh, never. Now, I know when I walk in here, I think I could do this, and so it depends. It's different for every person. Your loved ones need to know what your preferences are. And so if you think about for yourselves, I know a great many families that I've spoken to feel guilty when they bring their loved one to a care community. It doesn't matter if you move them into the Taj Mahal, it could be the nicest place on earth. There is still a part of us that believes my parents took care of me, I should take care of them, they should be at home with me. And for whatever reason, we drive ourselves crazy with that sometimes. And it creates a lot of guilt when they exceed the care we can reasonably provide, whether that's because our house has steps, whether that's because we have full-time jobs or a house full of kids, whether that's because they need medical care that we just don't have the training to do. Any number, any number of reasons why we can't care for them. And we logically know that, and yet we still sometimes feel guilty about putting them in a place that can do those things that we can't do. I can tell you that my parents have both been very clear with me because both of their mothers have had dementia. They've both said, put me in a home. I don't want you to do this. I'm glad that I was able to do this, but I don't want you to do this because it was a nightmare. Put me in a home. And as uncomfortable as that conversation was, I'm grateful that they had that conversation with me because it gives me guidance. And so the same is true for our own families. Talk to them about what you are and are not comfortable with. Talk to them about when you would and would not be comfortable with, extra care, whether you want that care to be in-home health aides, whether you want that care to be strictly family all the time, whether you're okay with going into a care facility. And if you have preferences of a care facility, where that is, all of those things are going to give your family peace of mind, and they're going to make sure that your needs and your preferences are honored if you get to a place where you can't communicate them anymore. Now, just know that just because that's your preference now does not mean that later, if you need it, you'll be happy with it. I think we've all seen that in our own loved ones. They might love the place when they get here, but they still every once in a while are like, I want to go home. So it is unfortunately part of the package, but truly, if you think about now what you might be comfortable with later, and you give your family that guidance, it will make your lives and their lives better in the long run for knowing what you want and for giving them the opportunity to honor your wishes. And so then this last one is maybe a little bit, this is probably the hardest one in some ways, especially if financially we just don't have the means to do it. But if you're able, speak with an attorney about whether a power of attorney, advanced directives, those sorts of things are right for you. Okay. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what power of attorney documents do. We tend to think of them as like giving a person say over all of our decisions in our lives. That's not actually true. So a power of attorney document does not ever override the person's individual will. So if you have a power of attorney, say you make your sister, your brother, your husband, whatever, you make them your power of attorney, and you're saying, no, I don't want that. And they're like, yes, she does. your choice is still the one that matters. The power of attorney only steps in and has the right to make those decisions when you are no longer able to, whether that's because you're unconscious, whether that's because you're incapacitated, whether that's because you develop dementia, whatever the case may be. But I do think there's some misunderstanding about that, and people are hesitant to, and so they put off creating those documents. There's nothing wrong with creating those documents, and it's definitely better to have them in place ahead of time. And if you're concerned about it, you can make them limited in scope. So you can make it so that it's only accurate, or it's only in effect at a certain time, or it only applies to certain situations. So say you've got, a son that's a banker, probably a good person to put in charge of your finances. Say you've got a daughter that's a nurse, probably a good person to put in charge of your medical health. Do you want the banker in charge of your health? Maybe not. So you can make those things specific. You can tailor them to what's right for your needs and your family, and the sooner you do that, the better. And again, same as with the financial information, you want to make sure it's in a safe place, that it's all together, and that your loved ones know where to find it when they need it. Same is true for advance directives. This is a conversation I know a lot of families do not have, and it's such an important one to have. So your family should know when you do and do not want to go to the hospital. They should know what types of treatment you are and are not willing to. If you've ever been on a ventilator or a respirator, it's not pleasant. It's not a pleasant experience. Feeding tubes, not a pleasant experience, things like that. So if you are the person who doesn't want that discomfort, they need to know, because they may very well want to save you no matter what. They love you. If you're the person who's willing to do those things, my life is worth fighting for and I'll do whatever it takes, also great. Your family needs to know that. So you definitely want to specify those things. You definitely want to have those conversations. And this is going to sound probably a little bit crazy, like, feeding tubes, ventilators, stuff like that. Obviously, those are things we want to talk about: blood transfusions, organ donation, all those like big picture things. One of the things that we don't often think about is CPR. So when you are making an advance directive, you want to include your preferences as far as CPR and resuscitation in that, because realistically, if CPR is done properly, you're coming out of it with broken bones. You're going to have broken ribs. You're going to have a broken sternum. There's going to be a lot of pain, a lot of bruising associated with that recovery. And yes, you're alive. But if you're 98 years old and your body is falling apart, that pain might not be worth that struggle to you. And I just know I see it a lot, that several of our residents have like the green light. Yes, do CPR, do everything, take every life-saving measure you can. And then when it happens, the families are horrified at but they're in so much pain. Why did we do that? Like, because we had to. If you don't explicitly tell us not to save their lives, we're going to try everything we can to save their lives, even if it costs them that quality of life. And so it's, again, hard conversations to have, hard soul searching to do, but something you definitely want to consider when you do get to a place where you're ready to draft these documents. Think about whether you want CPR, whether you want to be resuscitated. And it might, again, there's gray area. You might not want CPR, but you're okay with a defibrillator because it's not going to cause that same damage. You might be okay with the paramedics doing it, but you don't want your family to do it because you don't want them to have the traumatic experience of doing that. If you've ever performed CPR, it's not an easy thing to do. It's very emotionally and physically demanding. So, those are all things that you can specify in those documents and tailor them to what you want and what's right for you and for your loved ones. So these are all like bonus, really going above and beyond things, but they're also just smart things to do as we get older to make sure that our wishes are honored and our loved ones know how to care for us when we're no longer able to care for ourselves. that make sense? Questions? Yeah. Okay. I see Gail's got her hand raised. Can you?
I had to unmute.
There you go.
Do these documents follow you? Like, I think we have everything on file at UMC for mom, but if she gets taken away to the hospital, I'm not sure they have the DNR and the whatever. How is that managed?
So, so what I can tell you is that if we send your loved one to the hospital, we send all of that paperwork with them.
Okay, good. Okay.
So the very first thing we do, so if we, like, say we call 911, the first thing we do is print their face sheet, their insurance cards, their medication lists, their powers of attorney, their living wills, their pulsed forms, which is just a one sheet kind of abbreviated living will, all of that, and we give it all to the paramedics when they arrive.
Okay, good.
So in theory, well, hold on, take it with a grain of salt. So in theory, all of that information goes with them. In practice, I've experienced many times that the paramedics do not pass it on to the emergency room docs, or that the emergency room docs do not pass it on when the person is admitted, or that somewhere in that shuffle, some of it gets misplaced. And then we have family members show up to the hospital and the hospital won't let them in because we don't have your documentation. And it often comes back to us like, well, you didn't send it. Well, we did, you know, and we'll happily send it again. That's not a problem. But at that point, it's often already caused you some distress, you know, because
I think that's what happened one time when mom had to go. So it should happen, but I hear you.
Yeah,
there's a lot of exchange.
Yeah, we always send it. I can say that with absolute certainty. We always send it, but they don't always pass it on, especially if the person is going through multiple transitions, like from the ambulance to the emergency room, like to being admitted. And God forbid they need to be admitted to multiple departments. It might make it with them to the OR, but might not get into the acute rehab afterwards, that sort of thing. We can always resend copies. We can always print extra copies for you to take with you. It's a great idea to take them, to have them on hand if you need them.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, all of that is good. I will say, once you've given it to a hospital, they will typically keep it in your record.
Oh, okay.
So if the person's been to the hospital once and they had those documents then, usually they'll still have it for subsequent admissions.
Okay.
So at that point, if you update it for any reason, you want to make sure that the hospital has an updated copy as well, because they'll go based on the one they have, even if we send a new one.
Oh, ooh.
And they may not notice. So, you know, so it's just a good thing to be on top of. If you know, if your mom, you know, dad, whatever, goes consistently to the same hospital every time they need treatment, if you update that documentation, you might just want to send it to them or give them a call and let them know, so that they can make a note that the one they have on file is out of date, so that when a new one comes along, they know.
Yeah, that's good to know. Right. I wouldn't think to do that.
Right. It's not a it's not a thing that crosses people's minds. I would never have thought of it if I hadn't seen it happen here easily a dozen times, you know. And I've been here for about 2 years, so that's a lot for 2 years.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
We discovered this is not a question, but just for everybody else's knowledge, if your loved one has a portal, a healthcare portal through, you know, Jefferson or whatever, if they have the share everywhere option, then a hospital can log in. And if you upload their advanced care directive onto the portal, then they can get it right from the portal. And that was, because my dad was in like 3 different hospitals, 3 different rehabs, and I just had to keep doing that. But it was very convenient because it was COVID and we weren't allowed to hand deliver anything, you know, even though we had the paper copy. So that's always helpful.
Yeah, that's great information. Thank you, Linda. All right. Anybody else? All right. Okay, so that's everything I had for today. So I believe next month, last month I had given us a choice between this and another topic. So I believe next month we're going to be focusing on anxiety and paranoia in dementia. It's a thing that a lot of our loved ones struggle with. So we're going to talk about what it looks like, what triggers it, how we should respond to it, that sort of thing. So that's the plan for next month. I think with the holidays, it's going to come up really quick because I didn't want to be messing with anybody's holiday plans. So I believe I have it tentatively scheduled for December 13th so that we can kind of get it out of the way and you can get on with, you know, Hanukkah and Christmas and all that fun stuff. So I'll be sending out the link for that probably later this week. Does anybody have ideas for future topics that they might want us to address?
You've covered all the major ones.
Okay, well, good. That's good. Maybe at some point I'll just start sending out reviews of the previous ones. So, okay. All right, so then, yeah, next month's will be on December 13th. I'll be sending out the link in a couple of days and we'll focus on that anxiety and paranoia, as I mentioned. And if in the meantime you come up with other topics that you think of that might be helpful, feel free to shoot me an email, give me a call, whatever, you know, whatever's easier for you, to let me know, and I'll get it on my list and we can talk about it.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Courtney. This was very informative.
Yes,
Oh,
thank you very much.
As always.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody.
You too.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.